Good evening, everybody. Welcome to what is the 26th SWOG webinar in the series. Tonight we have Brian Palmer, who reached out to us on Instagram and he emailed because he'd seen one of our adverts asking for SWOG speakers to join our community. Tonight he will be doing a talk about ancient woodlands, and I won't say any more on the matter. I'll hand over to Brian. Take it away, Brian.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. See if I can get the slides to move. There we are. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about ancient woodland and ancient trees tonight. They are quite different, and I'll explain why they are as we go. Firstly, just a bit about myself. I've been a Woodland Trust in Wales volunteer since 2013 when I was approaching retirement, and focus mainly on ancient woodland restoration projects and recording ancient trees, hence the talk tonight. Since 2000, I've also been a small woodland owner. I've got a 5-acre piece of ancient woodland beech plantation, and I'm in the process of restoring that to mixed native using low impact silviculture, I think is the word, i.e. horses. To extract the wood wherever possible, doing as little damage as possible. Recently, the last 2 or 3 years, I've also become a volunteer director of the organisation called Coedwig, which supports community woodland in Wales. And one of the things I'm really pleased about tonight is that Small Woods and Woodland Trust and Coedwig and by implication, Coed Lleol in Wales are being sort of pulled, kicking and streaming together, if you like. So we'll start with ancient woodland. This will take up most of the presentation, and we'll have a short break for questions before we move on to ancient trees. So in the chat, just put down a word or two of what comes to mind when you think about or picture a woodland in your mind, if you would. Anybody there? Shapes, gnarled wood and moss, microbiome, biodiversity, bluebells, variety, canopy, tranquility, damp, greenery, yeah, restful buzzing insects, snakes. Excellent, thank you. What you're actually describing in simple words there is an ancient woodland. If you plant 1,000 trees, you don't get all that for a good number of years. So in our minds, we automatically relate to ancient woodland in this way. And I believe that all of us are descended from woodland dwellers, if you like, in Western Europe, and I believe it's inside of us. The woods are in our psyche. A lot of our fairy stories are based on stories from the woods. You know, the Babes in the Woods, Little Red Riding Hood, even Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and those sorts of things. And a lot of our place names as well are based on woods, and some of our personal names as well. So woods are sort of inbuilt in ourselves. So where did these woods come from? This is a picture of a typical Celtic rainforest in North Wales, very mossy, very gnarly. Where did they come from, these ancient woodlands? So what you see here is a map going back to 16,000 BC. So the outer boundary here on the pale green was the land that was above sea level at 16,000, which was probably nearly all covered with ice, no trees on it at all. But that was the land that was there. And gradually, over the centuries, the land disappeared because as the ice sheets melted, sea levels rose, and we moved down through Dogger Land to Dogger Bank. And those of you who listen to the shipping forecast will be aware of Dogger. It still exists in the shipping forecast. And then by about 7000 BC, we were down to just this dark green boundary. The Irish Sea had been formed in that time. And then at about 3000 BC, the land between what is now United Kingdom and the rest of Europe was flooded as well. And if you like, that was the original Brexit, where we became separated from Europe. And at that point, trees and plants and people found it very difficult to migrate across the water. But during the sort of 10,000 years before that, there was, as the land appeared, there was a gradual migration of seeds and trees and birds and insects across that way. So when that stopped at around about 7000 BC, anything that was already in the United Kingdom is now classed as native. And very little managed to cross the channel after that. So that's where the term native woodland comes from. There's some argument about how many trees are native, but it's around about 70. So in terms of the world species of trees, which is tens of thousands, is actually quite a small number. This slide looks at the timeline, a similar timeline going from 12,000 BC up to present day, and looks at what happened on the ground. So as the ice melted, bare ground appeared. Initially, that was just frozen ground or tundra, but then the first tree species came across from Western Europe. And the first ones to arrive were birch trees, and if it was particularly wet, alder and willow trees. They're still known as pioneer species. If you think about any piece of derelict industrial land, which is just left, first thing that appears is birch and willow and possibly alder if it's particularly wet. And that process is still happening in the Arctic Circle. As the Arctic Circle moves north now, birch trees are advancing northwards behind the melting snow. And then over the years, that was followed by pine, hazel, lime, oak, elm, ash, and beech. And all the others sort of came along as well, the hawthorns and the apple trees and those sort of things. But these are the main ones. And we know this from looking at pollen samples deep in the earth, looking at going back in time. And then round about 5000 BC, man started to have an impact. Most of the UK was covered in trees, and some was mosses and bogs at that point. But up here, man started to have an impact, clearing away the trees and creating grassland for grazing their animals. And then round about 3,500 BC, they also introduced arable. They started to settle down and not move around quite as much and introduce arable. And the rate at which they remove the trees in this 1,000 years is absolutely fantastic. It went from 95% to about 50%. By hand, no JCBs, no chainsaws, all done with sort of slash and burn techniques. And that process has continued right down to the present day with arable and grass taking over from the trees. And we got to a point where we now have only about 13% trees, and more than half of that is conifers. This little triangle here, C, is conifers. So the scientists said, not unreasonably, that from the year 1600 backwards, we were unable to create significant portions of new woodland. So anything that's been there since 1600 has probably been there since way back 8, 10,000 years ago. So 1600 is a fixed date that defines what is an ancient woodland. We'll talk about how you prove that. The other two little triangles here, this is the urban jungle at the top here, which actually, when you look at it, it feels enormous, but it's actually quite a small percentage. And the conifers down at the bottom. So the percentage of actual ancient woodland is very, very small. In North Wales, where I am, it's about 4% of the total land, and more than half of that 4% is damaged. So less than 2% is natural ancient woodland, if you like. So it's very, very precious. So how do we tell if a woodland is ancient? One of the things you can do, if you haven't got a map showing it, because maps started around about 1600, being reliable, particularly estate maps and things like that. But if you haven't got a map, you look for historical features. And what you've got here is a diagram showing a saw pit. They didn't have the technology to cut down the trees and carry them away on big removal lorries and that sort of thing. They cut them up in situ, generally. There were some exceptions. If you needed a particularly large piece of wood for building a cathedral or something, then they found a way to do it. But generally speaking, they dug a pit and sawed it up in situ. And the guy on top of the log here is known as the top dog. The guy at the bottom is known as the underdog. And he's the guy doing all the work. The downstroke does all the work. You're getting covered in sawdust. So you want to get into work early and be the top dog. You can see these shallow, long depressions in the ground. This is in a conifer woodland, which has been it's ancient woodland that's been transplanted, and you can see these. Here's another example of a coppiced woodland, and here there's a shallow depression, quite hard to spot, but and they were in use up till about 100, 120 years ago, I guess. So if you're out in the woods, what we say is listen with your eyes. Your eyes will tell you the story of what has gone on in the woods. Not so much these days. I used to do ancient woodland walks, and I always said, listen with your eyes and read the story. The other features you can look for is ditch and bank boundaries. So what you've got here is pasture on one side and coppiced woodland on the other. The sheep would not be allowed into the wood until the coppice was well established, otherwise they'd just eat it. And you can see the remnants of these as you walk around the woodland, banks and ditches. Charcoal pits. A lot of coppiced woodland was there simply to provide charcoal for smelting iron and lead and things like that. Most big towns had a green belt when the Industrial Revolution started, and that green belt was there not for nature, not for forestry schools and things like that we use it for today. It was there to provide charcoal for industry. And typically you'd have a family building maybe 3 or 4 charcoal pits in a week, running them for a week and changing them. And again, if you look around, you can still find shallow circular depressions in these woodlands. And if you dig down, you can very often find bits of charcoal. Charcoal is very slow to rot away, so it's another thing to look for. Coppiced woodland. Most woodland has been coppiced at some time, most historical woodlands anyway. Coppicing, as I'm sure you all know, is the process of cutting a tree down at its base and encouraging new growth. This is a relatively new one, and as you go around, they get older, and the base gets wider and wider, and eventually, the stems are coming out the side, and eventually it becomes a coppice stool. These are trees that have basically said, I give up. I'm not producing any more timber for you. You've had enough out of me. Um, but they are signs of ancient woodland as well when they get to maybe 2 or 3 meters in diameter. Veteran pollards are another sign. These may well have been along a boundary, um, and they were cut at head height in the same way as coppice, so that animals could still graze up to them or underneath them. So if you see a line of pollards, it's probably a boundary between um, land that was used as pasture and woodland that was kept separate. If you see them spread throughout the woodland, it usually means that that was woodland pasture. So the animals were allowed to graze and feed in the woodland without eating the young sprouts of the pollards. Very often they're in lines for architectural reasons on old deer parks and things like that. These are some lovely old beech pollards that you might see. The other indicators of ancient woodland, there is a list of plants and animals that significantly indicate the presence of ancient woodland. They vary around the country, and it's advisable to get an expert to come and help you with these. But things like violets, things like this fritillary butterfly are also indicators of ancient woodland. And potentially nice old trees. You don't often get nice old, big old trees in ancient woodland, usually because the woodland has been worked and the trees just don't have chance to grow to that size and age. This one here is beside what looks like a public footpath. These days, the tendency is to cut down the old tree so it doesn't cause any risk to people using the footpath. We would say, move the bloody footpath. Sorry for my French, but leave the tree where it is. The other indicator that we're just starting to understand is soil. If you go into an ancient woodland and take a cubic meter of soil out, you will find well over 1,000 different organisms in that soil. They do not just happen by themselves. They get there, they build up over a period of time. So, as I said at the start, if you plant 1,000 trees, you don't get that biodiversity in the soil. And we're only just really beginning to understand that. No doubt you've all heard of the Wood Wide Web, which is the fungal network that allows trees to communicate and feed each other and that sort of thing. That's one of the things that we're just starting to understand. But there is a huge diversity below the ground in ancient woodland that is worth preserving. In terms of categorising, these things like to be categorised by people. There are three main categories: ancient, semi-natural woodland, plantations on ancient woodland, and restored ancient woodland. So it goes back to this date of 1600, which incidentally is 1750 in Scotland, because the mapping didn't really start in Scotland until 1750. Ancient semi-natural woodland, broadleaf woodlands, mixed, mainly native, with a structure with a canopy and sub-stories and what have you. Quality of that depends on how well it's been managed, obviously, but there are very, very few, and they tend to be quite small areas of ancient semi-natural woodland. They tend to be on the sides of steep ravines and things like that that have just had no chance of being used for agriculture or being planted with conifers. So they're particularly precious. Plantations on ancient woodland site, pause. These believed to have been continuously wooded since 1600. Again, you need to go into the history and do the surveys. Have a canopy cover of more than 50% non-native, usually conifer tree species. So these are damaged woodlands, but most of them are recoverable. And a lot of the work that the Woodland Trust has been involved in is finding these and encouraging landowners to do the restoration work. or at least halt the decline in some way. We'll talk a bit more about that. And then the restored ancient woodland sites or RAWs, these are that, again, have been there since 1600 and have gone through a phase where the canopy cover was more than 50% non-native and is now coming back. They are recovering. And if you look at them on an aerial photograph, an aerial map, the poor sites look like corduroy because they're stripy. The trees are planted in straight lines. The raws and the ancient semi-natural look like broccoli because they're all bumpy and lumpy. So that's how they started to do the surveys. It was purely by aerial photography to start with. They're now doing it on the ground. So ancient woodland is a particularly important habitat, something that should be looked after. Currently has no protection other than if it's in a triple SI or a SAC or something like that. Ancient woodland has no protection, as we've discovered with the HS2 train ripping through loads of them. And one of the things the Woodland Trust has been doing with all the UK governments is encouraging them to A, record where they are, map them, which they're doing, and then B, put some protection around them. We believe they should be treated in the same way as historic monuments, really, because they're so precious. So one of the reasons they're so precious is medicine. We don't know what potential there is in these ancient woodlands and in the soils associated with them. We do know that 50% of most medicinal drugs come from nature, mainly from trees and woods, but that rises to 70% when looking at cancer drugs. And some of the more common ones you'll be aware of, aspirin, penicillin, and cyclosporins. If you have a relative who's had an organ transplant, chances are they've had cyclosporins to prevent rejection. And that was discovered as recently as 1983. And it's still happening. Lichens growing in woods in the UK are helping deal with mad cow disease, basically CJD, BSE. So who knows what's still in there that might help us in the future. But they're important for that as well as for the diversity in the wildlife. So very short, few ideas on, if you're interested, what the path is to looking after your ancient woodland if you happen to be lucky enough to have one. So the first thing is to determine the status. If you look on the Woodland Trust Ancient Woodland website area, there are 3 links there. One to the Ancient Woodland Inventory in England, one to the one in Wales, one to the one in Scotland. They're all slightly different, of course. If you can, organise an ancient woodland remnant survey. So this is someone will come in. Here in Wales, the Woodland Trust provide people to come in and look at woodlands, do a survey and make some recommendations for short-term and longer-term actions. Make a plan and agree a woodland management plan with the Forestry Commission, Natural Resources Wales or Scottish Forestry, depending on where you are. That plan may last 50 years. The ones that the Woodland Trust do in their own woods are for 50 years. The one that I'm doing is only 10 years because I'm already well into my 70s and a 50-year plan won't work for me. So some of the things you can do, halo thinning of remnant trees. So you may find if it's a conifer woodland, there's the odd broadleaf tree struggling to survive. So clear a halo around that, gradually let the light in, and you'll be amazed at how that tree will recover and what will grow up in terms of understory beneath it. If it's a conifer plantation, the general practice is to do a progressive thin, starting with 5% and another 5%, another 5%. That works well with conifers. You mustn't do it too quickly So otherwise you just burn everything and things dry out. Um, but it is very successful, has been done for many years in conifer plantations. Quite a few plantations are actually of beech. My woodland is of beech, which was planted in the 50s by the Forestry Commission. There was a good market for beech at that time. It was sold off in the 80s by Maggie Thatcher because the market for beech had disappeared. Um, Thinning beech doesn't really work. If you take 5% out, within a year, the canopy is closed. So you don't get the light coming back in. So what you have to do with beech is to clear it in coops. Um, so maybe take out an area of 100 trees or something like that, and then gradually extend it, connect them up, and that sort of thing. Track the changes, track the biodiversity increases, hopefully, with repeat surveys, and basically enjoy it. Here's an example of, I think it's a wild service tree, which again is an ancient woodland indicator in a conifer plantation where the halo thinning has just started. Here's an example of the ancient woodland inventory map in North Wales. You can see these little areas here. They tend to be fairly scrappy bits of woodland down valleys and that sort of thing. And usually if you click on them, it tells you what they are and where they are and so on. When I'm doing this online, I mean, not online, in an online room with people, I can click on these links and show people the maps, but I can't do that tonight. Another useful resource is the Woodland Trust Visiting Woods website, where you put in your location and it comes up with these little balloons which you can click on, and it tells you these are all woods that are open for access, and that very often they're Woodland Trust woods or National Trust woods or council woods, etc., etc. Tells you a little about them. So if you are looking to find some ancient woodlands, click on that and go have a look. And that's hopefully the sort of place that shortly, as the bluebells come out, you'll be able to find. So what I would suggest is that you go explore some of your local ancient woodlands using the maps and using the visiting woods. And there's an expression in Wales, dewch yn ôl at eich coed. I don't know if any of you know what that means. It means go back to your woodland, literally. The Welsh use it to mean go get your head straight, go sort yourself out. So I would suggest that if you don't already do that, take the opportunity to go back to an ancient woodland and sort yourself out. So we'll pause there and Sarah will open it up for questions. Do we have any questions in the chat?
Let's have a look. So, question: to what extent has deer proliferation damage exist? Hang on a minute. Let me start that sentence again.
Yeah, I can
Basically,
see.
uh, damage.
Existing ancient woodland, yes. It
Yeah.
is a significant problem in particularly in southern and eastern England, South Wales as well. Deer proliferation is damaging ancient woodland. And it's one of the things that we're trying to encourage landowners to deal with. It's a tricky subject, shall we say.
Can't please everybody with that subject.
No,
Let me sidestep around that.
yeah.
Another question higher up was Chris asked what causes a coppice to die. It seems odd with good root systems and not too rigorous time between cuts, but Anthony offered an answer to that one, the failure to recoppice.
Well, yes, that's failure to recoppice, but sometimes the tree just said, "I've had enough. I've been doing this for several hundred years. You've had it." They don't do it forever, sadly. They get so big that they just can't sustain it.
Right. Um, Molly asks a question. Does the protection status of ancient trees extend to Northern Ireland as well?
Well, there is no protection, so yes, there is no protection anywhere
And
in
that
UK,
stretches
Northern
everywhere.
Ireland. Yeah, sadly. Um, I mean, there are guidelines, there are planning guidelines that says don't touch ancient woodlands, etc., etc., but they're just not strong enough. If you own a piece of ancient woodland, unless it's in a triple SI or a SAC, you can do what you like with it, basically.
It's just sort of done
Nobody
on
can.
your people's own code of ethics, not quite good enough.
Yeah.
Uh,
So yes, it is. We are pushing governments to change that, both for ancient trees and for ancient woodland.
how many signatures do you need to get a petition? It's you can do like online. I think with all of our communities, we could get something aborted,
Yeah, yeah. Good plan.
something
What's
we
the
can
best?
chat about via email, Brian. Um, Rod, what is the best method for transitioning from bracken to woodland in the context of clear-cut pause? Oh,
Yeah, so if a pause has been clear felled, yeah, you'll get bracken and bramble coming back. Um, the best method of transitioning is to plant trees. Um, Trees will grow up through the bracken, through the brambles. Eventually, they'll provide a canopy, and the brambles and the bracken will shrink. Um, so I think the, a better way to do it is not to clear fell, is to do a gradual thin and manage it that way. But if it has been clear felled, then planting mixed native trees in there is the best way.
mm. Um,
Not
Michael,
glycophosphate, yes.
he answers the question. It's 100,000 signatures we need. Well, there's 100 of it here in this room
Yeah.
at the moment. So it's a start if we all ask so many people. Karen has come up with a good workaround. Individual trees can be protected. Would protecting a number of trees in an ancient woodland help? Would that be sort of
Well,
something to slow it down?
that's a planning protection. If she's talking about a TPO, that is a
Right.
planning protection. And um, the penalties for removing a tree that's got a TPO on it are not prohibitive. It is purely about planning, not about the wider picture of diversity and the environment, etc., etc.
Right. Um,
You can put a TPO on a woodland, yes,
yeah.
but
It's very
it's
difficult.
not an easy job.
No, it's very difficult to find out how to protect our woodland in perpetuity. Please do a webinar on this swag. Okay, yeah, noted.
Okay,
I will write that down. Um,
covenants.
yeah, you can put tree protection orders on patches of woodland, as far as I recall. Okay, this is
Yes, you can. Yeah.
okay. Any more
Okay.
questions, anyone? If
Thank
you
you.
type them in, and if not, I'll hand back over to you, Brian.
Yes, the people who felled the sycamore gap tree went to prison. A, a slightly different thing, but yes, that was protected, but not because it was old. It's because it was in so many films.
Yeah.
Pe People were right. So okay, I'll talk about ancient trees now. Then, how are we doing for time? Oh, 35 minutes. Good. So ancient trees. Slides. So this is all about a website called the Ancient Tree Inventory, ATI for short. This is supported by the Ancient Tree Forum, the Woodland Trust, and the Tree Register. All three are national organisations that support this inventory. It used to be called the Ancient Tree Hunt, um, which I think was a lot more exciting than an inventory, particularly if you're taking the grandkids out. We're going on a tree hunt. I'm going to collect some inventory is not quite as exciting, but it's there. It's a good thing, and this is the first step really in this process of convincing the government that we should protect our trees a bit better. Is knowing what they are and where they are. Get them on this inventory. So I'm going to have a quick run through what the inventory is all about. So the inventory um, covers all sorts of trees. There isn't a fixed date on when a tree becomes ancient, like there is on ancient woodland. It might take 100 years for a birch tree to become ancient. It might take 500 years for an oak tree. It Might take 1,000 years for a yew tree, or even 2,000. So we've got some examples here. An ancient ash tree. This is a fairly classic shape and size of ash trees, but the opposite extreme, an ancient hawthorn in a windy site. Um, both of those can be classified as ancient trees. Totally different. A line of alder trees as well, a beech tree, and what you see on this tree is the formation of semi-independent columns within the tree, or fluting. And that's one of the features that we look for in ancient trees. Sweet chestnut has the same fluting, but it's twisted. For some reason, chestnuts twist as they grow. Must be something to do with the rotation of the earth or the moon or something. A field maple, which has gone hollow. It's not very big, as you can see, in comparison to the person standing next to it, but it's still classified as ancient. And this one's an ancient yew tree, which the center of it has disappeared completely. And these semi-independent units that were starting over here have become almost separate trees. They've still got the same root system, but they're completely freestanding. So the ancientness is not simple. So we have three categories of trees on the inventory. Firstly, the ancient trees. There's coming up to 15,000 ancient trees recorded so far. We in the UK are very fortunate that we have a lot of ancient trees, mainly because of the way that the land has been managed over the centuries, over the millennia, with deer parks and historical parks going back to 1066 and the Normans. These trees are typically not found in woods. They're very often found in parks, in fields, etc., etc. So you don't often find them standing in woods because the woods are managed. They get cut down and replaced or coppiced.
Ironic that they can exist so long in deer parks.
Yes,
Back to the
yeah,
previous topic, yeah.
yeah. But they'll have had some protection when they were first growing, very probably. So the definition is that they are past mature and old in comparison with other trees of the same species. So you're only comparing like with like. You don't compare an oak tree with an apple tree, for example. So the key characteristics, the girth, the size for its species, what we call retrenchment, which is the top shrinks, the top grows downwards as it gets old, and very probably hollow. Because as I'm sure you know, trees only eat and drink through a very small amount of the outside of their girth, and the inside gradually will disappear. It gets rotted away. It gets recycled. They're trees that make you go wow, generally speaking, and some people would call them ugly. I call them gnarly, and in some cases quite beautiful, I think. So you know when you've seen an ancient tree by these features. We'll go look into that a bit more in a minute. We also have a category of veteran trees. In sometimes the two get mixed up. People call ancients veterans and veterans ancient. There's rather more of these, about 110,000 veterans. They have some of the ancient characteristics without the great age and usually without the great size. So this example here, for example, looks as if it's been struck by lightning or blown off in a gale. It's not that thick, a tree, compared to its neighbour here, for example, but it's surviving. It's got some of the ancient features. There's quite a lot of debate goes on about when is an ancient tree a veteran or when is a veteran tree an ancient, which all adds to the fun. How do you decide? Veteran tree displays similar characteristics but lacks the great age. An ancient tree is one that has passed beyond maturity and is old or aged in comparison with trees of the same species. So along the bottom here, you've got a sort of timeline. This looks like it's either an oak or a sweet chestnut. So starts growing, it matures, it produces acorns or conkers or whatever it's producing. And then gradually, um, once it's past this mature point, it will become more and more ancient. The top will decline and you'll get what they call stag's horns sticking out the top of the tree, which are dead branches. It gets basically shorter and fatter in the same way as we do, I guess. Um, Bits drop off, it becomes hollow, and eventually it will die. It's still providing habitat. And an oak tree across that, which may be 900 years, an oak tree will support well over 2,000 different species in that period. And it's supporting different species here to the ones that it's supporting here. So it's important from that point of view. And out of that 2,000, well over 200 only live on oak trees in the UK. So they're very important. So the characteristics that we look for, I mentioned a couple. Dead wood on the ground. We like to leave the dead wood on the ground. We don't like it to be tidied up because it's all part of the recycling process. A large girth or burring on around the base. A hollowing trunk. If you're out exploring, if you haven't got a walking pole, then find a stick. You'll be amazed how far sticks will disappear into the base of trees. Dead and hollowing branches, cavities and water pockets, which very often fill with debris and have what we call cuckoo trees growing in them. So you maybe have an oak tree and it's got debris growing there. There's maybe a holly tree or a rowan or something growing out of a little water pocket. So they support other life. This retrenchment, this reduction from the top, woodpecker holes, fungi which are decomposing. This is some sort of bracket fungi, buttressing, which develops to support the great weight and the wind, and lots of epiphytes, things that grow on it, mosses, lichens, ferns, as I say, cuckoo trees as well. So these are all things that we would ask people to look for and record and take photos of when they're putting trees on the ancient tree inventory. This is a tree that we found in Machynlleth when I was doing an ancient tree training day. This is a sweet chestnut in autumn, and I think you can see most of the features on this tree. It could have been the model for the diagram. We were absolutely flabbergasted when we found it. So then we have a third category, which was added relatively recently, notable trees. So these are trees that are potential veterans or ancient trees. They may be particularly large specimens for their species, and hopefully they're protected in some way. They may be just significant in the local area. So it may be that you actually know the history of this tree. It was planted for Queen Victoria's Silver Jubilee or something, and it is being looked after and it has potential to become a veteran or an ancient tree. And there's about 50,000 of these on there at the moment. So those are the three categories. If you haven't already been on the website, I would suggest that you do when we're finished. It's the usual register and sign in, username and password problem that you have to go through, but it's well worth doing. The main things you can do on it is add a tree or find a tree. So if you're out walking and you think you've found an ancient tree, anybody can record an ancient tree on this system. You don't have to be an expert. There is some guidance on how to do it, which we'll talk about, but anybody can add a tree. The process it will go through is that it will be recorded on the system as an unverified tree. It will only be visible to people like me who are registered verifiers. And we'll be asked to either look at it on the system and verify it. If there's enough information provided, we can verify it as a veteran, an ancient, or a notable. Or if we need more information, we can go out on site and look at it and confirm the species, confirm the status, etc., and verify it. And it then becomes visible as your tree on the inventory. So anybody can do it. If you want to find trees which are already on the register, on the inventory, you click on tree search and put in a postcode or a place name, and it will come up with a map showing you where all the trees are. So if you want to go visit an ancient tree that's already recorded, then, or find out if one that you found is already on there, that's the thing to use. Use the tree search.
You know when they've been Nate, like when they've been identified as veteran or
Yeah,
notable, etc. Do they get given a name or a number or a code or anything?
they're all numbered. They have a unique number in the system. Some of them have names,
Yeah,
um, but that's usually a local thing rather than a national thing.
yeah,
Um,
okay.
yeah, I mean the major oak in Sherwood Forest, you know, everyone knows that, I guess.
Just up the
There
road
are,
from me.
yeah, not far away. There are a couple of things you can do to help yourself understand this. Um, there's a guide to recording. There's a guide to measuring the girth. Measuring the girth is quite important. It gives us obviously the size, but also an estimate of the age. Generally speaking, we don't cut down trees and count their rings. It rather defeats the object. Um, but so that there are some rules and guidance on how to measure the girth. So just as a quick guide, measure the girth at chest height. Actually, it's more like chin height for me, 1.5 meters. Um, and roughly speaking, an oak with a 1 meter girth is about 50 years old. Depends where it is. If it's sitting in a woodland in shelter, it'll be different to one that's sitting in a field in the gales. It take longer to grow to that level in different circumstances. But then there's a sliding scale down through ash, chestnut, beech, sycamore, and fir trees. You know, fir tree in a good situation will grow 1 meter in 20 years. Some of the overseas fast-growing ones will grow 1 meter in 5 years. So you know everything is different. And then the experts will argue for hours about whether it's ancient, veteran, notable, and so on. And here's a rough guide. So you can see a yew tree needs to be probably 6 meters girth before it's considered ancient. And it's such a slow growing tree, it may take 1,000 or 1,500 years to get to that level. There are yew trees out there that are thought to be 2,000 or 3,000 years old. Most of them are in churchyards, and they're older than the church. They were there well before Christianity in some cases. Sweet chestnut and oak, again, 5 or 6 meters is the cutoff point, and then you know working down. So field maple, it only needs to be 2.5, 3 meters before it is considered to be ancient. Rowan and hawthorn, smaller still. So that's just a guide. This is a copy of the map, same area as I showed you with the ancient woodland inventory. So there are 3 different views you can have. If you click on this button here, you can have either Ordnance Survey, which we've got here. You can have aerial photographs, which can be useful, although they tend to be taken in the summer. And if you're out there in the winter, it's not that helpful. or you can get an ancient map as well, a sort of 1850s ordnance survey. So you can see what was there um, 150 years ago and relate it. And these different coloured balloons indicate the different types of trees. So the ancients are orange. There's a few ancients here. The veterans are green. The notables are purple. The unverified ones are shown as grey. So that they wouldn't be visible to you as a normal user. They're only visible to people who've been through the training and are registered as verifiers. So there's a little bit of work in this area for someone to do some verification, and then they'll appear. Some of the others, a lost one is shown as blue. I don't think there's any examples. Those are generally trees that have been on the inventory, but have maybe blown over or been cut down. But we still want to record the fact they were there. Sometimes, like here, you can see there's a no entry sign. So one of the things we ask you to do is to record the accessibility. So if it's on private land, you should get permission to go record it and get their permission to put it on here. They may decide that they don't want any Tom, Dick, and Harry tramping over their fields to come and see it. So that's shown as a private. And occasionally you'll find a star tree. I'm not sure what the criteria for that is. You have to be somebody special to have got one of those, I think. So that's an example of the map. So what I would suggest you do now is go hug a tree. Because one of the ways you can measure a tree's girth, if you haven't got a tape measure with you, is to give it a hug. Because your wingspan, your fingertip to fingertip, usually is the same as your height. So if you're 6 foot tall, your wingspan is usually 6 foot. And if you've got the kids or the grandkids with you, you can work out how big and therefore how old a tree is. But also, if you're looking in your area, find some trees that have been recorded. They may have been recorded 10, 15 years ago. Go take some new pictures. The pictures might have been taken in the winter, take them in the summer and add them. It's very easy for anybody to add new pictures and new comments to existing trees. So I would encourage you to go do that. One of the things we do, certainly here in Wales, is run ancient tree recording days as well. I've got one coming up on Tuesday at Plas Tan y Bulk. So if you are interested in becoming trained on how to record them, get in touch with the Woodland Trust or the Ancient Tree Forum. The Ancient Tree Forum has lots of groups spread around the country. If you Google that, you can find them and they may help you get trained. Okay, so any questions?
I'd like to just show this picture. I don't have
Oh, wow.
enough members of my family to see how old this one is. This is in California, though. This isn't local.
Yes, yes, slightly different rules apply
Yeah.
with that one. Yeah, but yeah, probably 400 or 500 years old.
Thanks. Thanks, Brian. Right, we've got quite a few questions here. Let's have a sift through. So here's a question. Is honeysuckle associated with ancient woodland? Just off the cuff question.
It's more associated with established hedges, usually. But yes, it could be, you could find it in the woodland.
Okay.
But very often hedges are long, thin bits of ancient woodland and have the same list of indicator species. So yes,
Okay.
it potentially is.
I wonder how that is in other countries because hedgerows are a sort of a British thing, aren't they? They don't have them in a lot of Europe.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
Although in Normandy they have what they call the bocage, which is hedges on top of stone banks. And
Yes, I have seen that.
yeah,
Yeah. We'll have to do a thing on France because they do the ballerina tree thing as well, but that's a
yeah.
swagging off for another day. Ruth asks, when they get tagged and they get given a number, are they tagged on the tree? Like, I don't know, like how you tag
No,
a pigeon? No.
no, no, just on the system. You will find tags on trees. Some councils record them. Places like or areas like Snowdonia National Park, record them and put numbers on them. That's quite separate from the inventory, though.
Okay. Um, Chris asks, are there any fungi that are symbiotic? If a saprophyte is on the interior lignin filled center?
Beyond my pay grade, that one.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do.
I'm sure there are, but I couldn't go into any detail.
I've got a I've got a
Well,
fungi guy. I can report back on that one, and I'll pop it on the socials. Um,
there was a
Mycorrhizal fun
question about, is the recording being published, that I saw as well.
Yes, it will go on our YouTube, and I will send you the link. So we will, yeah, we maybe perhaps someone will put in the comments as well. Um, let's have a look. Oh, Rich was on a forestry course in Longleat today, including a talk on ancient trees. The specimen that they visited on that estate was an oak with a girth of just under 9 meters. Absolutely
Wow.
sensational.
Yeah. I hope
Wow.
you gave it a good hug.
Yeah. Did you? Did you, Rich? Did you give it a good hug? Which will report back. So Juliet says we have an excess of 20 oaks growing in relatively shallow soil on a steep slope that we measured. What difference in estimating age does the fact that it's on a slope make?
Um,
A factor.
there are rules as to how you measure on a slope, um, which help standardize that. But yeah, it is a difficult thing. I mean, estimating age is a very imprecise science.
Yeah, of
If it's
course.
on a windy hillside, it'll be short and stubby. Um, uh, so yeah, there's more than one ways of estimating the age, not just the girth. Good question, Zoe.
Uh,
Animals that live in holes. Um, Birds of all sorts, bats, um, small furry things like uh, mice and shrews live in holes. Insects, lots of woodlice live in little holes. Hundreds and hundreds of things live in holes
yeah.
in ancient
Hopefully
trees.
more dormice than we used to have in Leicestershire because dormice got
Yeah,
reintroduced about 18 months ago. So,
yeah, good. But yeah, great question.
okay. Too many questions. Some of it's in Welsh. Brian, you're gonna have to you're gonna have to field Katrin's question.
Well, there's a question here. Do these rules also apply to Sitka spruce? My woodland seems to have mostly these. In terms of ancientness, Sitkas don't get generally allowed to get to ancientness. They're cut down and used for timber. But the ancient woodland restoration process is very much applies to Sitka spruce. Yes.
Okay.
Was there a Welsh question somewhere?
It, yeah, I don't know how to like read it out to you.
Where's where is that?
Uh, it's from I don't know how to I don't know how to tag it to let you know. Um, it's a I tell you what, if any does
You
anybody
could,
else? Yeah, I don't know. We might have to move on. Um, oh yeah, no, Rich did hug the tree. You'll be pleased to know the 9 meter one.
yeah.
What about ancient trees in the Channel Islands? What are they doing to protect those types? Well, we're really traveling tonight.
I don't know. Sorry, that's a
Okay.
difficult one for me.
Um, oh, okay. So Rod's just typed the question again. It's the second one up from the top. I think it might be saying thank you in Welsh.
Oh, diolch yn fawr, right, yeah.
Is that what it means?
Diolch yn fawr, yes, thank you.
Uh,
Diddorol iawn means interesting, very interesting. Diolch yn fawr.
okay. Well, that brings us to 7 o'clock, but I feel like
Yeah.
this has been a very well attended. Did you know you made 3 digits? We made
Really?
100 attendees. I thought I would have been happy with 60. So smash the
Yeah,
target,
that's brilliant.
Brian. Really
No,
good.
there is another whole presentation about the importance of the words associated with woods and trees in Welsh. Um,
That
which
sounds like
I
another.
could I could go on all night about that.
Sounds like you're offering to do another webinar, and I know that we'd be
Well,
very
it would
pleased to
only
have you
be
back.
probably only of interest to people in Wales. But there is an old Welsh word, uh, the Welsh for woods and trees is coed. Um, coed cadw means we look after trees. But there's an old Welsh word which is gwydd, um, which also means trees, but also means knowledge. And a lot of the Welsh words begin with gwydd. So gwyddoniadur is a dictionary, gwyddoriaeth is science, Wyddfa, which is Snowdon, literally means the knowledge place. It means
Really?
where you buried the people with the most knowledge. So yeah, that's a whole other topic.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Another,
do you know what? I think Nicola sums it up really nicely. She says this is one of my favorite swag talks. Thank you so much. And I think thank you very much, Brian. It's just been really interesting. And I think the all of the trees that the veteran ones, they look sort of like wizardy.
yeah,
I bet your grandchildren love it. And they're all the trees that my son likes, all the sort of gnarly looking,
yeah, they're
twisted ones.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, just yeah, thank you so much, Brian. And I don't think this will be the last time we work together with a bit of hope from
yeah.
my end.
Well,
So
hopefully people can get onto an ancient tree recording training session at some point. And
yeah, and Swag community, thank you for joining us. And if you do
uh,
manage to log a tree and get it verified and let us know, please do let us know and email me at sarah@swag.org.uk and we can just put it on the socials and just to share good practice as per usual. Well, I wish you all
right,
a good evening. And Brian, if I get any more follow-up questions, I will just message them to you and I'll let you know when I've uploaded it to YouTube, which will probably be tonight.
okay, excellent.
All
Joch yn
right.
fawr, joch yn fawr i pawb.
Thank you very much. Take care, everybody. Thanks for your attendance. Cheerio.